Hey geeks, Tim here with another episode of Star Trek for tonight. I couldn't sleep, and the last episode was just so bad. It's still haunting me. That I decided to go ahead and do one more. Plus, I'm still technically a couple of days behind schedule, so this will help me catch up. Tonight's episode is episode 21. Tomorrow is yesterday. To kind of back up a little bit, when I did The Naked Time, the end of that episode, so the Enterprise was going down, and then they decided to mix matter and antimatter together and basically see what happens. And it pushed them back in time for about 3 days. And then that's it. That's the end of the episode. It's really random, and especially since the whole episode is about just kind of having fun and being drunk. When they wrote the script, it was a long script, and it was supposed to actually be their two-parter. And this was the second half of the script that they kind of changed and modified and did whatever. And I mean, they pushed it back to the end of the season. So in this one, the Enterprise goes all the way back to the 60s, which I kind of feel, I'm not sure if this is the first television show to do it, but I feel like that's kind of a staple thing, that love it or hate it, it's a staple for all sci-fi shows, futuristic sci-fi shows, that they end up going back in time to Earth to roughly the setting where they're filmed. I mean, this episode was filmed in 1967, and it takes place kind of in 1969. That being said, like, overall, it's a fun episode. It's just like The Naked Time. Like, it's so over the top in so many ways. But it's a fun episode. I've also talked about how over these episodes, you see a lot of things that are developed later. Even the last episode, that was so bad, you could see where they come up with the mirror universe from it. This is kind of that same way. This episode, Tomorrow's Yesterday, it's, realistically speaking, it's the fourth movie. It's a rough draft for the fourth movie. They go back in time, they're on a military base, and how do they get back to the future? They slingshot around the sun. Like, it's legit the fourth movie, just without whales. So that being said, otherwise it's a fun episode. It has a lot of unnecessary things, and that's where I think that this is the rough draft. For example, the computer. Spock has a throwaway line about how they had to go to Cygnet 14 or some planet, and it's completely run by women, and so they did maintenance on the computer and gave it a personality. Now, me saying that is more detail and took longer than Spock's throwaway line. And so throughout the whole episode, Major O'Barrett does the computer voice, and she's doing it with this really sultry, seductive tone, calling Kirk dear and stuff like that. And it's really, like, it's interesting and it's funny, but it's really pointless. Like, why? And of course, at the end of the episode, like, that's how it ends. I think she has the last line. And, like, they don't fix it. I guarantee, I'd bet my mortal soul the next episode, the computer's not going to be doing it. Like, it has no purpose. And that just kind of goes back to those old 60s TV shows, that they didn't have that level of continuity yet. That being said, I believe there's an animated episode where the computer gets a personality, and she kind of does it again. And then later on in other shows, there's entire episodes that have to do with the computer going wrong and having to fix it. Whereas this is it's a weird subplot. So there's that, and there's also to fix everything, they go back in time a little bit more, and then they beam the people back into their old bodies to erase their memories. Like, a lot of it just doesn't make sense. And that's where it's definitely a rough draft. And then they work on it over the years, and they do better. And then we end up with stuff like Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, which is great. A couple interesting notes was this is the first time that we've actually seen Earth. We've talked about it, we've seen parallel Earths and fake Earths and Earth-like planets, but we haven't actually seen Earth. And although it's the 60s, we've actually seen Earth now. So there's that, and Kirk mentions that there's only 12 ships in Starfleet. which I will have to do research on because I'm not sure how many there are supposed to be or how many there are like by the time we get to the next generation, but I feel like it's way more than that. So it's just kind of interesting that there's only 12. And I feel like that's also something that gets retconned, kind of like the year Star Trek takes place. At this point, they hadn't really figured it out, so that's why, like, with Traylene, he references, like, 400 years ago. And then in this one, they reference 200 years ago, and it's just kind of malleable. But yeah, so have you guys seen it? I feel like this is a really popular episode. I'm not sure, but I feel like it is. Have you guys seen it? What did you think? Overall, it's a fun episode. It's just not well thought out or planned, but it's a fun episode. Tomorrow's episode is the return of the Archons. I'm not sure how you say that, but I think that's tomorrow's episode. I don't know. I'm tired. It's time for bed. But yeah, so I will see you guys tomorrow. Let me know what you think, and yeah.